The Spider-Verse franchise is a true masterpiece, and there are so many small details in it that are easy to miss. In this video, I want to dive into a few interesting parallels between Miles and Gwen that really stand out. These moments are subtle, but they really help add depth to their characters, so let's take a closer look. The first parallel is one that many people may have already noticed: the way Miles and Gwen talk to their fathers when they're in their spider personas. Both of their fathers are cops, and when they're in spider mode, neither Miles nor Gwen uses their normal voice. They intentionally alter their voices a bit, trying to make themselves sound different so that their dads won't recognize them.
Oh, your son. How's he doing? You think he's gonna figure it all out?
How's the manhunt for me going? Good to know.
It's a small detail, but it's really interesting to see how both of them try to hide their true identities. And let's be real, it's also kind of funny to watch. Now, let's talk about another parallel that's a bit deeper. Both Miles and Gwen have had the painful experience of having their fathers see them next to the body of someone they loved. In the first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, Miles' dad, Jefferson, sees him next to the body of his uncle Aaron. Jefferson automatically assumes that Spider-Man was the one who caused Aaron's death, and he believes for a while that Spider-Man, which he has no idea that it's Miles, is responsible for it. On the other hand, Gwen's dad sees her next to the body of Peter Parker, her best friend, and assumes that Spider-Woman, Gwen, is the one who killed him. It's such a heavy and intense moment for both of them. The main difference here, though, is that Miles' dad eventually comes to terms with Spider-Man's innocence. Over time, he develops a better understanding and actually starts to work with Spider-Man, realizing that he wasn't responsible for Aaron's death. Unfortunately, Gwen's situation is much more complicated. Her father spends a long time hunting down Spider-Woman, believing that she was the one who killed Peter. This next parallel is a fun one. Both Miles and Gwen refer to the Spot as a villain of the week. Miles says it first, and then Gwen says it later, almost like she's repeating him.
Yeah, you got me agreeing with the bad guy right now.
Bad guy? He's barely a villain of the week.
Where's the bad guy you were supposed to monitor?
He just stepped out for a moment.
Dude!
Look, he's just some villain of the week.
Lila!
Oh, we don't need
Tracking.
I think it's really interesting how they both mock the Spot in pretty much the same way, calling him just another random villain who doesn't really seem that important. It's a little funny how they both have the same attitude toward him, and it's a subtle way the movie shows how similar they are, even in the way they handle villains. Next, we have another parallel that's pretty relatable. Both Miles and Gwen get a B in a subject because they missed a few classes. Miles gets a B in Spanish because, well, he didn't show up to some of his classes.
A in AP Physics.
That's my little man!
And AP Studio Art.
He takes after his uncle.
A- in English.
She's a tough grader.
And a B in Spanish.
What?
Gwen, on the other hand, gets a B in English for the same reason, missing some classes.
It was a good speech.
No wonder you got an A in English.
B. I got a B. Plus, missed a few classes.
It's a small thing, but it's really interesting these similarities that they share. Now, here's a fun moment from the movies that shows another parallel. I'm talking about borrowing the shoes of a friend. This first happens with Miles when he notices his friend Genki wearing his Jordans without asking.
Are those my Jordans?
I can't help it if we're the same size.
Later on, we get the same kind of thing with Spider-Punk when he sees Gwen wearing his Chucks, and he asks her,
Where's my chucks?
It's pretty much the same situation, except Spider-Punk knows Gwen's got a thing for Miles, and he's kind of messing with her in front of him, trying to embarrass her a little. There are two parallels that are especially heartbreaking. The first one happens when Gwen, frustrated and angry about Miles following her, tells him something she doesn't really mean. She says,
I shouldn't have ever come to see you.
in the heat of the moment, she says it out of anger, but deep down, she doesn't want to hurt him. Unfortunately, that same sentiment comes back to haunt her later. When Miles says almost the exact same thing to her, he means every word.
Hey, hold on.
Right, Gwen. You should have never come to see me.
This time, it's not said out of anger, but out of hurt and betrayal. The second parallel is just as emotional, and it's all about saying goodbye. Gwen has to leave Miles' universe, knowing she might never see him again. She says goodbye to him, even though he's standing right there in front of her, but he's invisible at that moment. Later on, after Miles learns the full truth about Gwen and Peter B., about how they both knew that his father is about to die and never told him. At that moment he feels betrayed, and when he's about to jump off the train, he says the exact same thing to Gwen, but this time, the goodbye feels different.
Bye, Gwen.
There's so much pain in his voice, and you can see the tears in his eyes as he says it. This next moment is really interesting, and while it might not be a perfect parallel, I still think it's worth pointing out. It happens when Miles and Gwen are looking for each other. Early in the movie, when they're swinging through the city together, there's a moment when Gwen suddenly disappears from view while she's with Miles. Miles is swinging through the city, holding a web in one hand, and he's trying to spot her, clearly looking around for her. Fast forward to a later scene when Gwen is clearly reluctant to chase after Miles. There's a moment that she's searching for him, and the way she swings through the city looking for him mirrors the exact same motion as when Miles was searching for her earlier. Now, here's another moment that's also interesting. We all remember when Miles follows Gwen after she leaves his universe. He jumps through the portal to be with her without her knowing, but at the end of the movie though, the tables turn. Miles gets trapped in another universe, and this time, it's Gwen who's going after him. Instead of him going after her, she gathers an entire team of spider people, a whole spider band, to go rescue him. It's such an interesting twist because it's like the roles are completely reversed. Miles originally went after Gwen, trying to stay with her, and now Gwen is the one doing whatever it takes to save him. This shift in their dynamic shows a deeper level of connection between the two of them. It's not just about one person chasing after the other, it's about both of them being willing to go to great lengths for each other. This next moment is really similar, and it's kind of touching. It's the scene where both of them look at pictures of each other. First, let's talk about Gwen. In the first movie, she takes a picture of Miles on the bus with her phone. Later, when she goes back to her universe, she turns that photo into a Polaroid. There's a moment in Across the Spider-Verse when Gwen is about to go into action, but before she does, she stops and stares at that Polaroid of her and Miles. You can tell by the look on her face that she really misses him. Miles has a similar moment too. When he's sitting on his bed, he lets his sketchbook slip and fall, and when he picks it up, he sees the drawing he made of Gwen. Just like Gwen looking at the Polaroid, Miles stares at the drawing of her for a while, and you can see in his expression that he's missing her too. They don't need to say anything for you to know how much they're both thinking about each other. Now, this next one isn't really a parallel, but it's an interesting detail that I think is worth pointing out. Remember the first time Gwen met Miles at school in the first movie? She introduces herself, but she's kind of trying to hide her real name at first.
I'm Gwanda.
Wait, your name is Gwanda?
Yes.
She says her name is Gwanda instead of Gwen, probably because she wants to keep her true identity a secret. Later, she tells Miles her real name, and of course, he knows her as Gwen. But what's interesting is that even in Across the Spider-Verse, when he introduces her to his parents, he still calls her Gwanda.
Gwanda and I are friends from school.
Yeah, we were just catching up.
Don't take him from me.
It's funny because even though he knows her real name, he hasn't forgotten the fake one she used when they first met. It shows that little part of their early interaction stayed with him. I think it's a nice little callback to their first meeting, and it will be a really interesting moment when Gwen reveals her real name to Miles's parents in Beyond the Spider-Verse.